striking the Islamic State, ISIS. And he did a 9-month deployment to Iraq and facilitated more than 650 strikes. That's kind of mind-boggling when I think of 9 months and 650 strikes. You guys are flying all the time, day and night, and you guys are able to see at all times. So you don't have the limitations we had. And 650 strikes doesn't mean 650 objectives. That means you're actually pulling the trigger 650 times. 800 ISIS members were killed, not just shooting onesies and twosies. You're getting really intimate look into a person's life. We watched this guy emplace the IEDs and then go home and have a fight with his wife as he constructed more IEDs in his backyard. It was very humanizing. It's incredibly voyeuristic.
Jump in and go to target. We were always 60 seconds away from a trigger pull. Now, regardless of what we were dealing with, by the time I was like fully operational on my own, right, with nobody over my shoulder, and then I was put up for an instructor 2 years later. The expectation was, perfection. You couldn't afford to miss because the people we're going after, were the Bin Ladens of the world. But if you see the complex nature of understanding someone's life, I mean, we had one dude we tracked for 6 years, right?
Welcome, Tanner. This is going to be a whole series on your background, specifically in the space of drone. See, I'm going to start using the terminology wrong. On piloting remotely piloted vehicles and the cost on the people that are doing this, on killing remotely, which for those who are familiar with that terminology, on killing by Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, on combat by Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, and then now Lieutenant Colonel Wayne Phelps writes on killing remotely, the psychology of killing with drones. And see, he says that, so that's why it sticks in my head. But just share with us a little bit about you, and then we will get into this podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first off, I appreciate you being willing to do this, and
Absolutely.
tell this story. I'm excited to, have another platform to get this out there and talk about it. So Tanner Yackley, former U.S. Air Force. I was a sensor operator on the MQ-9 Reaper, that big, beautiful bird right there above me. You got the Predator right below it. So I technically operated on both at a time. Granted, most all my hours are on the MQ-9. It was always funny. I'd screw with new pilots, and they'd be like, hey, how many hours you got in the MQ-1? And I'm like, 40. And they're just like, oh, God. And I'm like, I got 3,000 in the MQ-9. You're fine. But yeah, so I amassed 3,000 combat hours on the MQ-9, 3,400 hours total. All of my combat time was in under 4 years. So we were doing a pace 10 times that of any other aircraft. Flew over 1,000 combat missions for every mission set out there, especially in the teens. I went 2011 to 2015 is when I did my combat time. And then I went on to the schoolhouse afterwards, taught down there, was a lead evaluator down there, taught through a bunch of different mission sets that, people don't realize that we were trained in, right? Like combat search and rescue. I say that and people are like, wait, what? And I'm like, oh yeah, we had tactics for it all. So, air interdiction, strike coordination, reconnaissance, CSAR, close air support. I trained varying different mission sets there at the schoolhouse. Left that after 8 years and worked for General Atomics for a couple of years as an evaluator sensor operator there. And then I was extremely burnt out after a decade of doing it. So I needed a change, went to academia for a couple of years, taught as a professor for 4 years on UAS courses, so unmanned aerial systems. There's a bunch of different vernacular out there, right? UAS, UAV, RPV, RPA. It's changed so many times in the last 15 years. And drone, it all boils down to the same thing, right? And the biggest thing is understanding that it's not this little quad that's buzzing around. This thing has a 66-foot wingspan. It's over 20 feet in length. So it's a decent sized bird.
Awesome. In 2005, when we were in Mosul, the guys that we were working with were going out on hand launching drones at that point. What are tips in hand launch as opposed to the Reapers and the large ones?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the RQ-11, I think, if I can reach way back. The Raven, I believe, is what it was called. With that is usually a hand launch one that you
Yeah,
literally
that
fold
sounds
out
right.
the
The Raven.
wings and chuck it. You actually have 5 different classes of drones, and they're all dependent on altitude, weight, and different things. Your hand launch one would fall underneath your class 1 and 2, and then you get into larger ones like Scan Eagle, RQ-7 Shadow. Those, I think, if I remember right, fall underneath like your class 2 or 3. Those actually need like a physical launcher, right?
Mhm.
It's literally a catapult that shoots it off. Um, there, I got to see a RQ-7 Shadow unit at my time at the schoolhouse because they were right down the road in El Paso from us, which was kind of cool to be able to just see that kind of stuff, right? And then
Yeah.
those ones, they literally land it on a dirt ball runway, and they've got a hook on the bottom of it that literally catches a cable that's stretched across, just like how you think with like Navy and stuff like that. Then step up, you've got the MQ-9. That is a standard takeoff and land on a runway, right? But the beauty is you can launch and land that thing in like a couple 100 feet. It is so quick to get up and off the ground from there that it barely needs anything. Usually you're buzzing around 105 knots. It's pretty standard, 120 in transits. So it's not fast by any means, but the loiter time on it, is just insane. You've got so many variants to it and different things. You can add like extended fuel tanks to it that give you like an extra 500 pounds per tank. But the ramp weight is actually like 10,500 pounds. So that's including obviously missiles, bombs, stuff like that, right? Usually it's running with missiles. I love saying this now that things have changed enough. I'm like, back in my day, I feel like I just left yesterday, but back in my day, we carried 4 missiles on the MQ-9. Predator was super common to carry 1, only because of the weight with it. It just, you could sneak 2 on there, but it was a little sketchy, all right? And it just killed your endurance, right? The MQ-9 came on in 2008. MQ-1's been used since 2001.
MQ-9 is the Reaper.
Yep. MQ-9 is the
MQ-1 is
Reaper.
Predator, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I misspoke. It was actually 2000 that they started using it. It was 2001 when they actually first shot with it, because actually the very first time they had it, it was unarmed. They didn't even have missiles on it back then, until I think it was a general jumper back in the day that was like, dude, we need to arm these things. They had at one point, no kidding, I was Bin Laden. They had him under the crosshairs of a Predator, but they had nothing back then. They had no weapons, anything like that. So it was just like, well, there he is. It couldn't do anything about it. It took us a while, right? It really 2011 was really the big ramp up for the RPA world, the remotely piloted aircraft world.
Which coincides with the drawdown of the combat missions. I know specifically because I was a recruiter for the company that bought Blackwater, that bought Triple Canopy, that bought all
Mm-hmm.
these defense contractors. I was recruiting guys to be the bodyguards for the ambassadors of Kabul and Baghdad. And we were looking at bios and we're like, okay, when are these things falling off? When are all these rotations? Because you have to have 365 days of combat deployment specifically with that skill set. PTSD, whether you're doing bodyguard work as a driver or wherever. Everybody knew that 2010 was when combat deployments, because people will lie, says 2011 is what he wrote down, 2012, and then you look back on his DD-214 and it says 2008, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you're saying 2011 as if that's common knowledge, for most of us, we don't remember where it was when troops stopped being on foot and we started really focusing on the drones. Of course, it's a general who's going to go, but can we put a missile on it?
Yep. Yeah.
Can we
Exactly.
put guns on it? I guarantee you the first question was guns, and the second is a missile, and the third was, can we put guns and missiles on it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Which
just so everybody,
they finally did.
yeah, and just so everybody understands, I'm just going to give a little bit of familiarization. What you just described, the Group 1 is the small UAS, which technically to be a Group 1 is weighing 20 or fewer pounds and flying no higher than 1,200 feet. We get to the Group 2 is the tactical UAS. That one is between 21 and 55 pounds, flies no higher than 3,500 feet, and speed of less than 250 nautical miles per hour, knots. So you were describing how many knots it takes and how fast. I don't use knots a lot. So You just described 80 knots being not very much to me.
Yeah, to put that into perspective, let's take an F-16. Usually they're whipping around at like plus or minus. The Viper guys don't crucify me on this, but around 600 knots. Um, you can put that into perspective there. With it, obviously different maneuvering,
Right.
transit versus on target. You're
Mhm.
gonna have different varying speeds.
Speeds. Yeah.
If we had like a generator failure, right? That was our most common. This is a bad day kind of thing. We were max performing that thing at like a whole whopping 180 knots. So it's like I said, at the end of the day, not a quick aircraft by any
Right.
means, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be able to sit there over a target, sip gas,
Mhm.
and just provide that unblinking eye.
Recording at all times. And
Yep.
so nothing, like you just said, nothing goes unseen and nothing goes unrecorded that you guys would then have to go back, look over that.
Yeah.
So the tactical, just to run through, because there's 5 groups. Tactical UAS Group 3 weighs less than 1,320 pounds and flies between 18,000 feet and speed of less than 250 knots. So that's 3. As you can see, the jump up from 2 to 3 is pretty significant. The 4, which is the one I was remembering most, was the acronym MALE, MALE, which is medium altitude long endurance. Like you described, sipping gas, providing the unblinking eye. This is the next largest. Looks more like a traditional airplane and helicopter, which weighs more than 1,320 pounds. I don't know why the 20 is there, but 1,320 pounds specifically is what they decided on. Flies up to an altitude of 18,000 feet and predominantly is the platform for the Navy's MQ-8 Fire Scout, a helicopter, and the Air Force's MQ-1 Predator, and then the Army's MQ-1C, which is the Gray Eagle. So you mentioned the Predator. So one thing I've never mentioned, we are in Saudi Arabia. The war hasn't even started. We haven't attacked Iraq yet. Operation Iraqi Freedom was my first combat deployment. So we had to sit in the Saudi Arabian desert at the ARAR airport. For the first time ever, they brought us into the talk. And me specifically, because we were the forward observers, we were going to be the ones who were in charge of aircraft and, calls for fire from whatever the military had. They actually brought us in and it was like super secret. Like not everybody in the talk, they had a separate room that you had an armed guard in the talk to get into this part of the talk. And you walk in there and there's this massive screen. And what you see is the entire Baghdad International Airport. And what they had done is had a Predator fly circles around it, smaller, smaller, smaller. So you actually, and then it recorded it all. So it blew my mind, obviously. Like this was the first time I even knew really what a Predator drone was, what its capabilities was we could take the mouse and scan over any part of the airport and we could go back there. Obviously it's frozen in time. We're not seeing a live feed at that moment, but we could literally go and like look at different angles of the entire airport. And that was our first combat mission, was going to be to take down the Baghdad International Airport. So for me back then, I was like, what is this wizardry? How in the world are we able to literally scan over this and look wherever we want to look? That capability, as you describe, and as he starts to point out in this book, once that clicked, when a general saw, holy cow, can we put a missile on it? Completely changes warfare for all of human history going forward, because like you said, unblinking eye, doesn't take breaks, right? Everything everybody talks about with AI and these future, soldiers that look like us, actually they're already here and they're in the sky, and it's way scarier because you don't even see them. They're way up there, far above what the human eye is actually seeing.
Absolutely. Yeah, because that's the thing too that people always think of, with even the smaller ones and stuff like that. It's like the Shadow, for example, the RQ-7. That one you're usually sitting around like 7,500 feet. But the MQ-9, I mean, there's very common that we'd operate 20 to 30,000 feet,
Wow.
constantly. And I think the highest I ever saw was 38 once. Most of the time, your fuel efficiency, everything else, right? Obviously the higher you get, the better that's going to be to an extent with it. So we're always trying to max perform. So it's this juggling and balancing act of like, I need to get up high to be able to sip gas and sit there and provide that unblinking eye. And that was the beauty of it, is you could also, you could have the full motion video, right?
Mhm.
Because the MQ9 is full motion video. It's not like let's take the RQ4 Global Hawk, for example, right? Much bigger. That one's like got like double the wingspan of an MQ9, and it gets around like 120, 130 feet
Wow.
there, and can go up to 60,000 feet. That one they'll launch out of like the north side of the U.S. and fly down to Africa. It's crazy. But to sit there for a day and come back. Again, we were 20 to 30,000 feet, 105 knots, and sit there and just kind of buzzing, through. And then you could also add, Spaceballs reference, the beeps and the squeaks, right? With it, we could track, all that too. It was dependent on what we carried. We could have other imaging devices too. One super common one that's common knowledge is the synthetic aperture radar on it, the Link-SAR. So we could be able to take, not LiDAR, but essentially like that, right? Where it's just
Mhm.
scanning, gives you this grainy image. One cool thing it could do is called change detection. If I shot an image at something, scanned it, and then came back over like an hour later, it could highlight like what had moved at that point. So it was those little things, right? We didn't use it commonly. I hated it. That one especially, because it was usually on one of us, what they called SAR operators occasionally that could sit behind you. So it was just another task, another freaking mouse click. Because that's the piece too, right? Is like kind of setting the scene. We talked about the aircraft a little bit, but the ground control station, right? It's a 30-foot by 10-foot Connex box. It literally is the size of a shipping container. We were shoving one of those. It had carpeted walls. It was real nice to pet, when you're 3 in the morning and you're trying to stay awake. Dark room, because obviously we're killing all the lights in there, mainly because screen glare, because we're
Mhm.
staring at 8 different screens. A lot of info to take in, right? A lot of things to process. So the more you could take off your plate, the better, obviously, because at the end of the day, I cared about the screen directly in front of me. And that was, really it, because that was our heads up display. That was what was providing the live video. Everything around that was TAC maps, intel briefs, imagery for targets, battle management systems, right? Being able to track like where are other aircraft, right? We could be incorporated in with like Link 16 and fighters.
Imagine if you're flying, right, a level 4, level 5, you've gotta know where the other aircraft are so you guys don't have crashes.
Exactly.
Did that ever happen? Did you guys ever lose one by accidentally, like, it ever hitting aircraft? I would imagine not, but then again.
No, we had some close, yeah, we had some close mid airs and stuff like that. But no, I mean they've been trying to figure that out for years. They brought in like ground based sense and avoid systems to be able to try to alleviate that. But there's no real perfect answer per se yet, just because nothing can replace being able to pick your head up and look outside the cockpit and see, oh, there's an aircraft right there, And
Yeah.
with ours, it's like I had to physically. We had a little nose camera on the front. There's a little 30-degree slice. The pilot could switch over to that, but most of the time they were looking at what I'm looking at, right? Because they need to know what's on the ground, what's happening with the target. So it's this weird, you're zoomed in, right? And if I'm staring at my coffee cup that's sitting on my desk, right, I'm zoomed in on that. And we call it the soda straw view, right,
Mhm.
with it, because I'm essentially, just looking through this soda straw at this. And I could have a thunderstorm building right off my nose and not have a clue, right? Until all of a sudden you literally pick your head up and go, oh, like, we got to avoid that sucker,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Especially over
So,
there, right? Because
yeah.
the weather over there can be
Oh,
super extreme, and especially at the altitude you guys are flying at.
mm,
We think, "Oh, they're storm clouds, you're gonna get wet." No, you're up in the clouds where the lightning
mhm.
and where everything bad is happening.
Exactly. We had one come back, the radome, the cover on the front. That's the big hump on the MQ9.
Mhm.
If I can, let me see if I can get my finger there. That
Okay.
little
Yep,
hump
yep.
right at the top. That's for the satellite dish in
Okay.
there. And so that's what bounces the signal off the satellite, and comes back down, and for the controls there, because these operators are sitting somewhere in the States, right? And they're operating these things 7,500 miles away, halfway around the world. Just a whole bunch of just bouncing signals at that point, which is wild, because with all of that connection, you have a 2-second delay. So if I make a right hand input, right, to move the camera to the right, I make an input, then the input happens. You get in this weird paradox in your head of like thinking 2 seconds ahead, right? And you're trying to predict and you're trying to analyze, with it, which is a weird paradox to be in, especially when you're like, oh, I don't know, actively guiding in a missile. Uh, and I've got to be like, I hope I don't miss, right? Like, I hope to God this dude doesn't just decide the last 2 seconds to do something crazy. But really, at like 3 to 4 seconds to impact, it was like, I can try to do something,
Yeah.
but there ain't that I'm truly going to be able to do that's going to make an impact here for it.
Unintended.
So yeah, exactly,
All right.
exactly.
So what you just described, that was another question that I have because
Hmm.
Group 5, right, specifically the MQ-9 Reaper, the Navy's MQ-4 Triton,
Hmm.
and the RQ-4 Global Hawk all
Hmm.
fall under the high altitude long endurance HALE, HALE, which are the largest, weighs more than 1320, which I thought was interesting because Group 4 and 5 have the same minimum weight, but it
Hmm.
doesn't have a particular airspeed or altitude limitations.
Hmm.
And what you're describing is flying at 60,000 feet, something that's flying at 38,000 feet or 30,000 feet. That time delay, and that was going to be one of my questions for you after reading this book and learning a little bit more about the MQ-9 specifically is capable of doing. With
Hmm.
a 2 second delay, you still have to wait for the missiles to impact because they're not lasers. So, like you talked about, the higher you fly, great on gas, great on all those things. However, that adds to the error margin of
Hmm.
the time difference. So I would assume you guys aren't necessarily dropping from 60,000 feet, but then again, I don't know at what altitude you guys are going, but that was going to be my question was how many seconds are you really dealing with anywhere from not specifically, but I mean anywhere
Hmm.
from, 4 or 5 seconds up to, I mean, what's the longest delay you're dealing with? Like 10 seconds, something like that. And that is a huge margin of error because like what you just described. President Trump did this and it stopped him from being assassinated.
Hmm.
And it takes somebody who's walking out of their house to go get in a vehicle to leave. Now you've got ID. You guys still have to go through your checks to make sure you're,
Hmm.
the guy's there. So as a forward observer, what I can offer is we are the guys on the ground that are the human eyes that
Hmm.
can't have to be the ones who confirm and then we call in, right? We're not seeing what you guys are seeing.
Hmm.
We are in contact with Spectre gunships, with the Black Hawks, with little birds, and we're physically seeing them. Well, Spectre's way up there.
Yeah.
Love that. I actually got to fly a mission with him one time. I'll share that with you on another episode that we'll do. But it was really cool because I thought of this all as like this. For me, it was how warfare's now changed. I grew up, Saving Private Ryan came out, but you see how warfare was. You have to be able to almost make eye contact with somebody
Hmm.
to know where the enemy was and to confirm that's the enemy so you can shoot them. To skip forward to now, I'm able to call in weapons that are up there that they can't identify. So I'm their eyes on the ground. And now we move forward from that to the next evolution of warfare, which is you guys are being able to see crystal clear. And this is the main point. This is what I want to drive home. What you got, the only reason you're flying at 60, 40, 50, 30, 20, 10, 5,000 feet, a few hundred feet, you have wherever you are has to be crystal clear to where you can make identification of what it is that you're watching. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be there, and there's no purpose to have you there.
Hmm.
And that technology has advanced so far that even at those altitudes, which instantly when I hear this, and if I'm not from the military background, how in the
Hmm.
world are you able to physically see somebody on the ground and make visual confirmation that really is the terrorist? And especially since this isn't a generalization, but a whole lot of people who wear the same things and have big beards in that area kind of look alike,
Hmm.
especially as I'm imagining from 30, 40,000 feet.
When we switch from standard def to high definition, with the camera technology, it gave us a lot, right? And that was especially why in the early days, right? Let's say the early 2000s, right? So 2000 to 2010 even, or 2012. Drones, RPAs, everything else were being used, but at the same time they were still looked at as like, oh, it's a nice toy. When like the high def came on, so at 20 to 30,000 feet, I always tell people, I could see a license plate color, right? And I could maybe make out, what color like the letters were, but I can't tell you what the license plate specifically says, right? Even with high definition things like that. So a lot of it goes into it, right? With the whole targeting, and we won't get into the nitty gritty on that,
Right.
obviously, but at the same time, it's different. There's a lot more to it, right? Than just, hey, let me look. Is this the guy? Yeah, it could be, hey, do they have a specific, way that they walk? Right? Because everybody's got a unique walk and things like that.
Gate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, exactly. Your gait. So like, we'd have people in the background that were like literally measuring out the dude's gait, and comparing it side by side with like live video to recorded, or their arm swing, right? No surprise when you deal with a bunch of people that are in a lot of drone strikes. They start losing limbs. So it makes it a little easier to identify when the dude's like, oh yeah, that's the one armed dude. And and just so then the military humor and stuff would come into it as well. We had one dude that he always wore a white thobe, right? The man dress that they wore, and he was a big guy on this cherry red motorcycle. We called him Mr. Stay Puffed. Hey, you on Stay Puffed tonight? All right, cool. Like, because you knew everything about him, right? And that's the big piece that people don't realize is how much of a you got, personal, intimate, especially with the high values people, right? I knew who their wives were. I knew who their kids were. I knew how many goats they had, right? I knew what left turn they were going to take out of their compound every single day at the exact same time. And then one day they're not there, right? And that's the aspect of it that was unique. And people just think it's this, oh, just rogue, especially all the god awful movies that have been done about it. It's everybody thinks it's like, oh, you're just in there and some captain's making the call and going rogue and pulling a trigger. It's like you and I sitting here and I can see you on my computer screen. Well, guess what? I can take this computer screen and push it anywhere in the world. Same thing with with RPA and drone footage. It's I could push a live feed anywhere in the world, right? So you can get decision makers that aren't even in the same country seeing a live feed and go, "Yep, do it." Right? And that's the part that people don't understand, right? With this wasn't just some, you know, two operators in there being the pilot and the sensor operator. And I guess to clarify too on that thought is the pilot, right? That's the one. It's stick and rudder for one, right? The MQ-9. It's not a like what we call a point to click loader with like the RQ-4, the bigger one, because that is literally you're clicking a mouse and saying like, I don't know if you could, it's dropping waypoints, along a route and saying, "Hey, fly here," right? And it goes and does it, right? You don't have a manual control over that. Where the MQ-9 is like almost exclusively, especially for launching and landing, weapons employments, all that stuff. Like you are all hold modes off, right? Because it can do heading hold, altitude hold, airspeed hold, all those things, but you pretty much shut them all off whenever you're going, all right, it's game time because I need to max perform, right? This, because of course you have limitations with the satellites. It's not a fighter jet, right? Is what I'm getting down to. I can't sit there and just, all right, 30 degrees, right? Real quick. Like the satellite's going to be like, So everything was this slow and, smooth, methodical movement. We weren't built to do that either,
Right.
right? We weren't built to be that aircraft that's sitting there knifing through the sky, cutting in and out. We were there to just be that lawnmower in the sky, right? But with it, that's just sitting there buzzing along, flying that circle, burning that hole in the sky, to be that unblinking eye. And it was really just a bonus that we could also sling weapons from that to that at those altitudes too.
Well, I think
And
of it
be
like a hang glider more than right, because a fighter jet, the reason why they need those capabilities is because everybody else has fighter jets, and so
yeah,
you've got to be able to actually have a dogfight and maneuver in the air and go to battle with each other. But we're the only drone in the sky. Real quick, just because you introduced several things there, which I just want to leave this out here for people to understand. Marine Captain Douglas Wood described in vivid detail how he experienced the humanity of the targets he struck. Now, this was back in 2016, striking the Islamic State, right? ISIS, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And he did a 9-month deployment to Iraq, and him and his team facilitated more than 650 strikes. That's kind of mind boggling when I think of 9 months and 650 strikes. Now, I know because we had the highest tempo in the military in the
Mm-hmm.
Ranger Regiment, because we were direct action, all 4 of my combat deployments, we're getting details as to where this guy is, that guy is, and we're going out and hitting that place early as we possibly can, because
Mm-hmm.
we're going to get intel from that. And we might literally already have some information as to where the next person is on our target list. But we get enough information off of this objective, that we can then go straight on to the next mission. And so a lot of times we were doing 1, but then it would roll into 2, or even up to as many as 3 missions. Again, it's as long as you can work in the dark. You guys are flying all the time, day and night,
Mm-hmm.
and you guys are able to see at all times. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't have the limitations we had. And so 9 months and 650 strikes doesn't mean 650 objectives. That means you're actually pulling the trigger 650 times.
Mm-hmm.
800 ISIS members were killed out of 650 strikes. You're not just shooting onesies and twosies
Mm-hmm.
when you're doing it. He describes in vivid detail his experience and the humanity of the targets he struck. This is a quote from him. You're getting really intimate look into a person's life because the cameras are so good. We watched this guy emplace the IEDs for 30 minutes and then go home and have a fight with his wife as he constructed more IEDs in his backyard. It was very humanizing. It's incredibly voyeuristic. The key here at the very end, he says, but the killings weren't without a cost on his psyche, even though he wasn't at the controls of the RPAs. That is when I started to understand what it is that you guys deal with. And you just described he's going home and talking with his wife, playing with his kids.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing all these things. He just implanted an IED to murder a bunch of our soldiers that are out doing patrol. And now you guys, you have to try to stay away from overly humanizing these people
Yep.
to where you get attached. And that's something that is mentioned. And again, we're going to get really far into this as we go through this series, but I want people to understand. Let's go over real quick. Let's recap the numbers that you threw out. So 1,000 combat missions.
Mm-hmm.
As I described to you, on a 4-month combat deployment, which is pretty much the max.
Mm-hmm.
Special ops, they've already learned at the highest level, SEAL Team 6, Delta Force, Air Force PJs, the highest level guys. That's the only people I worked with. I didn't work
Mm-hmm.
with anybody that wasn't the tip of the spear. I didn't work
Mm-hmm.
with SEALs. I worked with DevGru. I didn't work
Mm-hmm.
with other, special forces guys. I only worked with Delta.
Mm-hmm.
At the highest level, these people that have been in combat for many, many, many years, 3 months is typically where they want to be. This they've learned the hard way, of course,
Mm-hmm.
because they want to push these guys to 6, 9, 12 months. About that time period is where people start making mistakes, because the amount of sleep deprivation that is naturally going to happen, no matter how much you want to sleep and no matter how physically exhausted your body is, your brain is wired awake.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting there one night. We still had to pull guard duty because we're on the special operations compound, and a mortar lands, the big
Mm-hmm.
sandbox that we built our walls out of. There was one about 50 yards away from me, maybe. And I just hear this kind of thump noise. They're all running around trying to find where this impacted. It was in the sand right there. Literally, if it was 50 yards over,
Yeah.
I'd be dead. It doesn't even have to be that close.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain, when you're deployed,
Mm-hmm.
you have a certain amount of bandwidth at the highest level. 1,000 combat missions, when you pair that up against a fighter pilot from the Air Force, from the Navy. What does that really look like? How many combat missions are they flying in that same in an entire 20, 30-year career?
The one thing I can equate there is the hours for sure, because the missions are gonna vary. Because that's the other hard thing too, is like our missions. Like I could technically do like one or two missions in a night because I could go step into a box, right? Just call it the box, but I could go step into that box and then I might go and bounce to a different one 2 hours later or 4 hours later. Because again, now you're just needing to make sure that people are flying the correct amount of time and not, granted they max performed us constantly, right? We were 6 7 hours constantly in the box. And the pilot manning back then was even worse. They were almost always doing 7 to 8, so it made it difficult because, like I said, it's not uncommon for us to fly over 1,000 hours in a year. And so, like, let's take my one guy I knew was an ex-fighter pilot, 30-year career in the military. He did like 3,100 hours in 30 years. Now obviously the entire 30 years there's staff duty and everything else, but you're still racking up those hours at that rate, and we were doing it 10 times the rate of that.
Mhm.
I did mine in 3 years and 10 months. Was 2,900 and like 64 hours. That's the biggest thing, is our pace was so breakneck, but they just looked at it as like, well, you're sitting in essentially an office
Mhm.
staring at a bunch of screens, no big deal. It made it even more difficult because there was such a disconnect, and such a drastic disconnect between the two, that it really didn't allow for your body, like you said, you're trying to operate at this high level, and that's why we dealt with so much burnout, and they still do, with it, because you're not able to operate. I mean, there was 4 years no breaks. Half the time, freaking our training time, right, that we'd get like a 2 hour to do training. There's plenty of nights where I would train on an active target, and they'd be like, listen, this is too important, we can't pull you off, you need to stay on this target and sit there, and you can do your training, right? And we're having to like cut corners on banking and on the tactics, because we had to balance the intel that we're collecting over the strike profile we're trying to achieve. So we're doing this weird balance, and one screen away I'm sitting there behind a student, because I was a combat instructor, taking my notes, push them through the scenarios that we build, and they'd be like, hey, snap back to target, we need to get you right there right now. That was always in the back of my head. I need to turn around and be ready to jump in and go to target, or at any time, right? There was always the reality, we were always 60 seconds away from a trigger pull. Now, regardless of what we were dealing with, I think of my very first strike, right, was just, hey, move to this target. And it was like, okay. And then we roll in there, and I'm like setting up my camera, like temperature differences and things like that, because you can have an electro optical or a day TV camera, you can have an infrared camera, and you can have what's called a low light camera here, and we'll leave it at that. So sometimes that stuff gets out of calibration, and that's my job as a sensor operator, is to sit there and know how to tweak it, how to recalibrate it, how to fix it to make it ready to go.
I really wanted to help people to understand that aren't in this space. One of the things you mentioned, it's not like the movies. One of the movies that's very popular that has Denzel Washington in it, and one of my favorite movies of Denzel, to be honest, when you see the reveal in the movie Deja Vu, to where he's brought in and they're trying to solve this crime of where this girl was murdered, and they're trying to keep him in the dark. And so they bring him in, and he sees a screen and all this crazy equipment, and they're looking on the screen. And with this crazy new technology, they can move from room to room, and they can try to figure out any details in this lady's house to
Mm-hmm.
see who it was that murdered her.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he doesn't know why they're trying to find who murdered her. And that reveal comes later on in the movie. For anybody who hasn't seen it, feel free to pause now and go watch that movie, because it is a great movie, and I don't want to ruin it for you, but here we go. Spoiler alert. They have in this movie the capability of going back in time,
Mm-hmm.
and what they're seeing on the screen is happening in real life in real time.
Mm-hmm.
So Denzel discovers this by taking a laser pointer, and he shines a laser pointer and moves it around on the refrigerator in front of her, and she sees it. And now he knows, and they know that he knows, and he's like, all right, stop playing games with me. What is this? What are we doing? They don't care about saving this girl. They're looking to find out who this guy is, because this guy is what they believe is the terrorist who ends up blowing up a boat and killing hundreds of people.
Mm-hmm.
So the reality is that's you guys are looking in real time at these people.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to see what they're doing on a daily basis that isn't evil. You're able to see what they do evil, but my wild guess is when you are brought in and they just need you to jump in on a mission like you described, you might be training somebody else. Which, how long were you in an experience before they started having you train people, by the way?
I finished my initial training. It's like 6 months of like, here's what the buttons do, here's the general mission sets,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of get you into understanding how that plays into the fold. Then you go on to your mission training after that, which is specific to the unit you're going to. That can be anywhere from a couple weeks to a month or two. I think mine was about a month or two. Um, by the time I was like fully operational on my own, right, with nobody over my shoulder, would have been June of 11. And then I was put up for an instructor 2 years later. I would have pulled the trigger a year later. And then I was put into an instructor role, 2013. Yeah.
From on your own, now you're training people to do this. And something else you just said is pulling the trigger. And we'll come back to that. But my point is, during your time there, you spent half of it essentially training other people how to do this job, which adds to what we've already described. In a vacuum is a crazy amount of trauma that you're witnessing. And this is the key. You're witnessing it. So even though you saw a guy plant an IED, you also get to see him at his house. Not, he's a father, not, he has a wife and kids. It's, you're not just taking him out there. You're going back and seeing who he's connected to, who's coming to visit him, who he's handing IEDs off to, because you got to keep that going. When I think of that, I immediately think of like the DEA and drugs, right? Where you're not looking for the drug dealer who's on the street handing out crack to people coming to him on the street corner. You're following the crack dealer back to his house, finding out everybody who's in his family, who they're connected to, and then who he's getting his shipment from, and then following that guy to his family and everybody he's connected with, and then keep going back up the chain. And then eventually you're taking these people out, and this was the part that I never even thought of until I was reading this book, someone else takes him out while you're not at work. So you didn't take out Stay Puffed.
No.
Someone else did.
Yep.
So you spent all that time, as the general described, very voyeuristic, watching this guy on a daily basis, being human, having positive interactions with people that love him, that he loves. You're not seeing the evil Nazi coming across the battlefield and you were shooting him with a well-placed shot, putting him in the dirt and ending evil there that day. It's, you're following him back home after he gets sent back behind enemy lines. And now you're going to follow his family and follow all the people that they're connected to and watch him for months. And that's the part that blows my mind, because it's not days and it's not even just weeks. Sometimes it's months. Sometimes it's years. That is mind boggling if you stopped and tried to process. It's going to take a lot of processing to understand the things that you guys have been through. And I think that might be a book title for you, The Process. There's so much in that. It's the actual process that you're going through for the kill chain to know who this is, to pull the trigger. But you're also having to process all the information from this guy going back to his family, being connected to another human, even though he's bad, even though he's murdering people, even though all these horrific things, you see him in the other light. And then also, right, trying to process this after. And I think that's where your story hit me right in the gut. And the second I heard about it and started looking into this, I was like, this needs to be a series and I want to share your story. And as much as people want to dismiss the things that you have been through because your feet weren't on foreign soil, brother, I'm not going to say this to the end. Like, I want you to know, brother, like, you have been through combat. You have seen the evil firsthand, and more so than I've ever seen. You've had to witness the things about the enemy that you don't even want. You don't even have to deal with that in special operations
Hmm.
on the front lines. In our capacity, it is just go run. That's the bad guy. He's going to try to kill you right now. It's you or him. You
Hmm.
kill him.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of the PTSD and the complex PTSD, which again, we're going to get deep into this
Hmm.
in the next podcasts that
Hmm.
we go through. You have been through war, brother, and you have seen things that other people would. I would absolutely not trade places with you.
Yeah.
I would rather be there and be in fear for my life and
Hmm.
have made it back, but to know that all I ever saw was pure evil in front of me. I never got to see them be good to anyone, pet a cat. They
Yeah.
kicked every cat they saw.
Yeah.
They kicked every dog. They
Yeah.
were never they were a caricature because that's how far gone it was with the people we were going after.
Yeah.
So again,
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say that to you, brother.
No, absolutely, and I appreciate that. It's because that's the thing. It's we were put through such rigorous pace with it, and then you're adding all these complex layers to it all, right? You're adding, that the intel briefs, that we'd get ahead of time, and the hours and hours and hours of target planning. The expectation was perfection throughout, because you couldn't afford to miss, because the people we're going after, were the Bin Ladens of the world. You didn't know what the implications were if you were going to miss that, right? So then you add in, we talked about earlier about the whole having somebody look at your feed and see what you're doing. Well, that's also a layer to this, right? I think this whole thing is like an onion. I can quote Shrek there
Yeah,
with it, right? It is though, because you start peeling this thing back, and it's like, yeah, on paper you're like, it's just a video game. What's the big deal? And it's like, no, but if you look and see the complex nature of understanding someone's life, right, from days, weeks, months, years on end. I mean, we had one dude we tracked for 6 years, right? And
wow.
finally got them, because one of the very famous things that we always said in combat was, well, the enemy gets a vote, right? Because we can have the most perfect plan, right? I mean, this thing can be generated up to the T. You can have aircraft that are doing this crazy dance, and people are scanning, people are clearing for collateral, all of it, right? We factored all of it in, right? It wasn't this Wild West, shootout every single time that people think. Like, no, we were executing at perfection and precision because we could. Granted, it took its toll on a lot of people, because you're held to this insanely high standard. You're 60 seconds away from a trigger pull at any given time, and then you're having to watch these people's lives unfold. And then, just like you said, right, when you're following those couriers, when you're following those other bomb makers, things like that, right, we called it spider webbing. So we'd follow the spider web, and it was, all right, track this guy to, you take the small fish to get the big fish, kind of thing. You're watching all the interactions, and you're going, oh, well, that's this guy because of XYZ that I saw last week, right? And you're making all these connections. But on the other side, it's just next target, next target, next target, next target, right? I remember, we'll get into this a lot more detail, but one tidbit of this is, I remember two guys. I remember walking down an alley, and I was watching them in infrared. They're in the standard traditional garb of a man dress, or a thobe, and one dude literally reaches underneath his thobe, pulls out a pistol, turns the dude to his left, and just shoots him. And the dude drops, and then the guy walks away, and they're just like, follow the guy. 4 hours later, I was still following the guy, right? And it's like, are we like, no, like, just nothing? Just that's
Right.
that's a normal Tuesday, and it was. That's how it was treated, right? Because it wasn't like anybody came up to me after shift and was like, "Hey, man, that was pretty up. You want to talk about it?" It was just, all right, man, see you tomorrow. If that was an isolated incident, this would be different, right? But it was 4 flipping years of this. It was every single day, and going through it, and having to deal with this complex piece of it. And oh, by the way, I was 19 or 20 years old when I first pulled the trigger. So the cognitive effects there and everything else along with it, of being so young doing it, and so much responsibility in the moment. I felt like I was on top of the world. I felt like I was a god. You know what I mean? I was strutting around at 20 years old, combat instructor, arrogant as all hell. And just because it was the business we were in, you were either perfect and professional or get the out.
Yeah.
Because our that's the one thing people don't realize. 2011 ramp up, almost all the pilots, right, that came into that class when they started really cranking out the numbers, they were pushing to like 60 plus combat air patrols, essentially the overarching number of how many aircraft they want. So they're ramping up training for it. Well, then obviously, like, they needed pilots, right? When they're building this up, they don't want to put a bunch of people that are green and in here and have them go and do these missions because they're gonna suck at it. Right, they want experience, and they reach out to, like, well, the fighter pilot community, pull a bunch of people, literally rip them out of their cockpit, throw them into a freaking box, and say, "Hey, go fly this lawnmower." Now, fun fact: the MQ-1 Predator had a Rotax snowmobile engine on it, so close enough. But
Wow.
the Reaper's got a 900 shaft horsepower, it's a little bit bigger there. But and I want to say it's roll. It's one of, like, the big ones. I think it's Rolls Royce, if I remember right. But
I think that's right. I think he mentions
yeah,
that it's a
yeah.
Rolls Royce. Yeah.
So they yanked a bunch of fighter pilots out of their cockpit, threw them in the box, and said, "Hey, go fly this thing." Do you want to talk about a group of people that were off and angry? I was trained by the most angriest group of aviators in the world, right? They were so pissed, right? I mean,
Mhm.
they just had chips on their shoulders, all of them. I mean, I had ex-Navy pilots I flew with, some of the best in their day, and then they get kicked over to this, and they're just like, "Go fly this thing." And man, they were pissed, but holy were they good.
Mhm.
I had pilots. I was 19 years old, right? I was a snot nosed punk, didn't know shit. And I had pilots just fucking, they thankfully saw something enough in me. I
Mhm.
came in and was struggling. I came in and I sucked at the job. I just kept getting all these barriers put in front of me, and I just kept crushing through them. I was like, "Dad, I'm going to be an instructor. I'm going to be an evaluator. I'm going to, do this," which led me to running units and just see how far we can go with this mentality. But that was the big thing, was those pilots that they even got the rap of, like, being like the redheaded stepchild. RPAs in general, right? We were always treated as like the redheaded stepchild because of how that career field was built. Even the sensor operators, right? In '08, when all the sensor operators started ramping up there, they were a bunch of one and ones, which was imagery analysis. They literally were like, "Hey, dude, we're going to take you from behind your screen and put you behind this screen instead. And that'll be good, right? No issues there." And so that was like the whole entire career field was imagery analysis in the right seat, fighter pilots in the left. That doesn't happen in any other career field, right? That is so off the cuff
Mhm.
and out, like, whoever the thought of that one. I was just wild how we got there, right? But it worked.
You bring people of that caliber in, they're going to make it work, right?
Yeah.
And but there's a cost, and this
Mhm.
is this is what we're going to keep going back to in every
Mhm.
podcast. There's a cost. It's called
Yeah.
pay to play. You
Mhm.
can do it with steroids. You can do it with anything in life.
Mhm.
Sure, you have the capability of ripping a pilot out of his seat that he
Mhm.
dreamed of since he was 3, 4 years old,
Mhm.
of being a fighter pilot, and now he's there and he's been doing this for a few years, and now you just put him in front of a screen where he doesn't get days off like he
Mhm.
used to, and he's not actually everybody's hero anymore. Now
Mhm.
he can't even talk about what he's doing. He can't share with his wife. He doesn't get to stand around and tell stories, with his buddies, and that also rips him away from his community. And sure,
Mhm.
some of them were probably taken together, but that's like, netting a few fish together to eat.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, it's great that I'm here with somebody else that's suffering with me, but they're going to suffer things that they didn't sign up for,
Mhm.
because and this is what I want to get back to you and what you just said, being 19 years old.
Mhm.
Obviously, we know 16, 17, 18-year olds went to World War I, World War II, and fought, right, on the most horrific, like, land battles ever
Mhm.
fought. And yet they had signed up for and knew full well what they were going into. When you signed up, what was it that you signed up for, and what was described to you about your job when you signed up? Because I guarantee you weren't recruited by the Air Force to be a Reaper pilot.
Nope. I signed up for it. I picked sensor operator, right? I picked the job, but I didn't have a clue what, in all reality, what I was going into. and neither did the recruiter. The dude pulls up the job on the Air Force .mil page, right? And is like, oh, here's what the job is in 4 sentences. And it's like disseminates live, full motion video, blah 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 kind of thing. Battlefield and my first tech schools, I was like 3-4 weeks into it, and some other guy, he was a prior service, and he looked at me and he's made some just one-off comment of like, well, when we're employing weapons, blah blah blah, and I like turned and looked at him and I'm like, wait, what? And he's just like, yeah, man, we're gonna be employing like Hellfire missiles, and I'm like, the is that? Like, I didn't have a clue. 18, 19, and young and dumb at that point. Didn't have a clue, going into it. And then it was like, oh, okay.
You just mentioned how far along it was before you even heard that they had munitions and that you were going to be in some way employing that.
Yep.
What were the milestones as you went through when you started recognizing what you were actually going to be doing?
We went through a lot of academic training and things like that, all the way down to, what they called it aircrew fundamentals. I don't know what they still call it because they've changed the courses like 69 times in the last 15 years. So you learn just basics, right? Of like how a freaking fixed wing flies, how a helicopter flies, what a cyclic is. And I've never used that piece of information in my life, but I learned it. And then you get into a little bit more of like doctrine level. Like I said, it was a one-off comment. It wasn't even in the training itself that I heard that, because it was so, here's how, aerodynamics work. Not, hey, here's what you're going to do, overall. We didn't really get that until, because it was about, I don't know, 3 to 4 months. You might sit for a month, 2 months, waiting for a class date, whatever there. So there was a lot of, especially back then, they were ramping everything up and transitioning everything down to the schoolhouse in New Mexico. But at one point, they had the schoolhouse outside of Vegas. I was slotted to go there. So back in May of 11, and then they were like, "Oh wait, no, we're shutting that pipeline down. We're going to open this other one up in New Mexico." And so I went July of 11. I was there till October, so it kind of puts into perspective the initial training. That's initial qualification training there. But you're doing training missions at all hours of the day, doing simulator training, academics, live flights, right, where you're actually at the controls at a local range, right, learning the basic button pushes, all the way to here's how you do like basic intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. It's about 3 to 4 months. Everybody's a little bit different just because weather and like that.
Are you in class with everybody on the exact same pipeline, or are there people taking courses with you in it that aren't going for the same job?
So early on, we, like the aircrew fundamentals course and stuff like that we went through, that was kind of shredded out to like a ton of different AFSCs. But once you got into like the initial qualification training, or even some of the later tech schools, you were kind of like lumped in as a class,
And
So
everybody's going for the same job. Everybody's
yep,
going to be doing the
yep.
same thing. And how large are classes of that? I mean, are you dealing with like 20, 30 people? Or are you talking about 100 people?
Nah, like 20, 30, and even
You'd get to
like
know
doing
the other classmates. It's
absolutely.
small enough that you guys
Yep.
would all end up working together at some point and getting
Yeah.
very
Well,
familiar.
I still got, well, like one of my best friends, like I met at Holloman, right? When I went through the
Mhm.
initial training. Well, technically I met him before in tech school. We, it's passing and things like that. He'll tell this outright. He hated me. I was an arrogant little back then, and just running my mouth everywhere and everything else. And, I've gotten a little bit better. I've known him for 15 years, now, and we kind of followed each other along. And that was the one thing with these pipelines, right? Once you got into like the initial qualification training through the schoolhouse, then you kind of were, I don't want to say locked in, but you were kind of following those people around, if you will.
Mhm.
There's plenty of times, I had people that went to the same unit I did, people that went to different units. But then that's the crazy thing is even if you had somebody that was doing like counterinsurgency missions and somebody doing high value targets, right? We were also on this really weird schedule of a 5 day on, 3 day off schedule. So you had an 8 day work week, right? So that moves your week every week
Mhm.
to the right by a day, which for 4 years is really annoying, right? There's so many times, especially like I was in Las Vegas, right? The city that literally rivals New York, right? It's the city that never sleeps. Still, there were so many things where it was like, there's this event going on downtown, down on the strip this weekend, but Saturday's my Tuesday, so I'm,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so that was also a hard part with it is you had to manipulate that, right? We had people that would, rent out houses together for cheaper. So you'd have, 2, 3 people living with each other. I'd like go over to buddies to watch football or something, and one guy's working one mission set, for one squadron. One guy's working a different mission set for another squadron, but it's his Saturday, my Tuesday, his Friday, right? And we're all just like after shift, and if it lines up, right? Because occasionally your schedule would shift or change for one thing or the other, right? So then it was always, hey, what's your weekend? Or what day of the week is it for you? So it
And
was a
that's
very
true.
common thing.
Yeah, and this is what I wanting to get to. My point with this question is the camaraderie, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you go through whenever you go through buds in the Navy
Mm-hmm.
SEALs, these dudes are going to be Navy SEALs. You're going to see each other.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with everybody in special operations, the Ranger Regiment. I'm going through with these guys. Some of these guys are going to be at first bat, some are going to be at second bat, some are going to be at third bat. Eventually, we're going to see each other. And some guys I never saw again. Some dudes I met only on combat missions. As a matter of fact, my next podcast episode coming out is the Jessica Lynch mission. I ended up running into a bunch of dudes from second bat and third bat that we hadn't seen each other since then. We had at least a core group of guys that all came with me to 1st Battalion, and they divvied us up between the companies. And even though a lot of times our company would be deployed different times of the other companies too, even still in the same battalion, bro, just having the ability to know that your buddies are here
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's on essentially the same rotation work wise. And if everybody's going out to go do combat training missions, which were worse than combat, because you were getting beat in the dirt there, because then they could sleep deprive you, stress you out of your mind, and overwork you to try to make sure your ability to handle that stress when you get to combat is actually going to be reduced from this. And then it will make it that much easier for you to continue going. So with you guys essentially not knowing who's going to end up where, because again, you didn't sign up to go to a place, the needs of the military.
Yep.
I want to go back to, you said that these fighter pilots, poor guys, man, wrong place, wrong time in history. You signed up for one thing and here you are. Now you're ripped away from what you want to do and you're stuck with these kids who, by the way, didn't sign up for this job. And that is the part that now I'm going to keep going back, especially if you read through On Killing and On Combat, you'll learn very quickly. He does a masterful job of breaking down all of the different decision-making catastrophes that are the Vietnam War, that are the Vietnam conflict. And everything that every idiot, and we know this now, right? And we can say you guys were absolutely idiots for coming up with the idea of drafting people, sending them over, and they know their start date and they know their end date. So they know they're going to go home at this date if they can just survive to that point. You literally just pitted them against everyone else to try to keep yourself alive.
Exactly.
And that's complete human nature. You can't unknow that. And then these are guys that you don't even know. So you're getting dropped in again with people that didn't sign up for this. They were forced, go to prison or go to the military. Well, of course, nobody wants to go to prison. And you're seen as a coward. And especially back then, everybody from World War II was around. I think that as we go through your story, I want that parallel to be there, because understanding what somebody signs up for versus what somebody is told they're about to do, like you, and people that are currently, because this is still happening, being ripped out of their career fields and pushed over here because of the needs of the military. I think that is a failure by design. We are literally building a flaw in our computer and wondering why these bugs keep screwing everything up. Your rotation work week and the rotation of your days off, and everybody else not knowing when their days are off and knowing that this could change at any day. All of those things builds in a sense of dread of not knowing actually what it's going to even look like. So on a day-to-day basis, trying to have a relationship, trying to talk with your family, trying to plan to do anything fun that you want to do. In the back of your brain, there's a dread of, but I mean, if it happens, I mean, I don't know. And that's what I got to tell my family all the time when I was in. I'm just like, hey, I'll be here when I'm here and I'll be gone when I'm gone. I'm not even allowed to tell you when I'm going to leave for a combat mission. When I get over there, I may be able to contact you guys, but the card deck, we were going through 1 through 10. If you were number 11 on the list of the most wanted people in the war, we passed you on to somebody else because you weren't important enough. Now, once we cross off one of the top 10, hey, guess who graduated? You did. We're coming after you. But I signed up for that. And this is the point. I joined the Marine Corps and I was indoctrinated into the mindset of the word kill for everything. Everything was killed. Something good happens, kill. Something bad happens, kill. I know everybody makes fun of Jocko for the good, right? It's good. No matter what it is, good. Okay. That's what kill is for the Marines, for every Marine. Doesn't matter if you're a member of the Marine Corps band or you're going into MARSOC, you're going into Force Recon, you're going to be Recon, EOD, whatever. Those dudes signed up for that. When I came out of Marine Corps boot camp, I was so ready to go to war. And then 9/11 happens and I want to go to war and I'm not going to get there with my unit. So I re-enlist for Army Special Ops and I go in with a Ranger Regiment. This is why I'm only continuing to talk for this amount of time. I had no idea what a Ranger really, really was. I didn't. I just heard that maybe they're infantry, maybe they take down airfields. Oh, what airfields, bro? What are you talking? Like, are we really doing that? These guys are doing shadow things that we don't necessarily know about. I'm signing up with a blank check of I'm going to get to kill bad guys. That's all I'm signed up for. Whatever this looks like, I'm down for. You guys did not do that. And I think in the book, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through the book. I haven't finished it because I want to go over all these things with you on this podcast fresh. This is just my personal belief. I believe that you guys are being set up for failure from initial training. I think that if you are pulling people out of Marine Corps boot camp, where the word kill is ingrained in your skull to the point that you are familiarized in every single thing you do with it being the purpose of taking the life of an enemy combatant, that is one thing. When I just read an article, the Air Force has once again decided that articles are not live ammunition, and they're going back and forth between an empty rifle, a rubber rifle. Should we have a real rifle but no live rounds? And the outcome of the article says, this is the person in charge of the Air Force basic training for every person going into Air Force that are eventually going to be flying Reaper drones and all these other drones and dropping bombs on people's heads. He didn't see the value. He didn't see the value in having live ammunition and a real rifle that could take someone's life. He didn't see the value in that being introduced back into Air Force basic training. Yes, somebody could accidentally shoot themselves. Somebody could go angry and become an active shooter. Absolutely. Could happen. And that would be horrific. And a second that happens, knee-jerk reaction means that it's all getting ripped away anyways. However, here's the pay to play. Here's pay to play. Pay to play is you were hamstrung at the beginning of the race. You didn't even know you were in a race that you were in. Everybody's sprinting all over the world because they're in active combat. You didn't even know that you were walking onto the track of an Olympic sprint and everybody's sprinting around you. And they go, oh, by the way, hey, how about you catch that guy real quick and stay up there for the next 4 years sprinting? Could you do that for me real quick, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say please? I mean, do it now. You have no choice. Did I mention that? Oh, and by the way, if you try to crack or pretend that you can't do this job, we're going to have to take somebody else and put them in your spot. Is your fault. And if that person cracks, if that person fails on their mission, which is even worse, because that gets actual special ops guys killed in real combat, that is on your soul, bro. That's on you. Dude, that's so many. This is the biggest cauldron of mistakes since Vietnam.
I've said this a handful of times. It was and is a melting pot of bad decisions, right? They took it and went, oh, let's have these guys not sleep, right? Because I was an insomniac for a year and a half. I was running on 2 hours of sleep, and rolling in there. And I can't tell the Air Force that because, again, exactly what you're saying, right? We sit there and fill out our freaking, operational risk management ahead of time before every flight, right? Hey, where you at? It's just like the fucking flight doc eval every year. How much do you drink? 1 to 2 a month. It's like, I ain't saying anything past that because I'm going to get ostracized, right? And that's the fucked up part with all these processes. It's like, you can't sit there and tell people, hey, I need you to do this high performing job, but if you can't fucking do it, we're going to kick you in the junk. No one's going to fucking admit anything. And that's why we have such a problem now. And that's why all these people that haven't flown, I've been out of combat for over almost a decade. It's still there, right? It's still hanging on because exactly like you hit on, right? Our schedules were all fucked up, right? I was on shift work for 7-week rotations. Every 7 weeks, I was changing shift for 4 years. You want to talk about a level of tired? Like, I was exhausted by that time. And I remember looking at my chain of command being like, send me to the schoolhouse. I can't. I am just dead at this point. And the schoolhouse was even worse, right? That's the up part is everyone's like, oh, Monday through Friday, ACC family days. It's so cool. And I'm like, I'm like, you can start at 2 a.m. and have to roll in there and brief. And I got to, half the time I got to go drag some kid out of bed because he's 18 years old and isn't used to getting up at 2 in the morning for a brief. Meanwhile, I've been there since, midnight 30, prepping everything, going over grade sheets, going over like that, and then doing potentially, we got double turned constantly throughout because it was just make it work. It's like it was just a bunch of just make it work, and it's like that's fine and all, but you can't sustain that, and you can't keep doing that 15 years later. We're well past the make it work stage. We're the holy crap. We made a lot of mistakes in this mission set. We need to fix them, and there's plenty of ways to do that, but they've got to fucking be willing to do that. And I will never go after anybody by name or individually or anything like that. But that being said, there are plenty of people that I have worked for and different things like that that aren't doing shit to recognize this problem and elevate it. And there's a bunch of people out there that frickin' I'll look right at the camera that I hope to God one person stares at this video and you're the problem is because you will not make a call and save people's lives. We just lost a frickin' instructor pilot 4 months ago at Holloman Air Force Base. What do they do about it? Nothing. Google it. You can't find it. But anybody that was there well knows it happened. And I was standing in the room 24 hours before one of my teammates put a shotgun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. This isn't going away, and we're sitting here and acting like, the war in Afghanistan's done. We're all good. It's okay. You guys have this up so bad and are literally getting people killed because of it. And if you would just, I'm not saying go out and, hey, we need to scrap this and turn into all the protesters and shit that I dealt with freaking, all those years ago. That literally people march from Las Vegas up to Creech Air Force Base, which was just wild. It's like 40 miles. And then lay in the road for us to not be able to get on base. It was super fun to deal with, right? Like I'm not at that level, but holy shit, you got to do something because this crap is not sustainable. It's burning out people. It's killing people. And all it needs is a little bit of care to go, hey, you guys aren't robots. You can't just sit here and do this day in and day out on these up schedules. I don't know when I'm going to see, my friend or my coworkers or things like that, because I might be lined up on a weekend with them. And then one week I roll in and they're just like, you're on a different schedule now. And it's like, well, I built my life around this on, going and watching football every Sunday with this dude. Now I got to change that again. What we were told when, right? And the zero help on mental health, period. Yes. I mean, it's because, and they'll say this till the end of the time that they're like, oh, we've got operational psychologists embedded in the unit. Well, nobody's going to them. Nobody. Because
and this is in the book. Yep. This is in the book, and this is something I can attest to. Here's what happens for everyone who believes that all the special ops, the Ranger Regiment we had to be cleared by a professional mental health expert. Here's what that actually looks like. And this is the way it will always happen if you leave it up to your chain of command. I'm going to give you a scenario. Okay. You are in charge of the 75th Ranger Regiment, guys. We went to combat. Everybody was sprinting. They handed us the baton. And right now we're getting bad guys every single night. None of our guys died. A lot took, rounds and shrapnel and got injured, but none of them have died. We saw a lot of people die. We took a lot of lives. Our compatriots, our British SAS, all these other dudes, regular military guys that were around us in the base areas around us in Baghdad, they had deaths. And so we would have to attend funerals for these guys, but we didn't die. So these are your men. All of them have to be cleared before they can really go out and start doing the decompression, which when you get back is a mandatory of, you have to give 2 4-day weekends, right? 96-hour passes. So they're going to work for 3 days and then be off for 4. Work for 3 days, be off for 4. Then they're going to work for 4 days, be off for 3. And that is our plan. That's the red carpet that we roll out for the mental health of getting these guys reintegrated back into society. But they do have to be cleared. How are you going to do that? How are you going to have all of these people be cleared? And what's your timeline on that? What would that look like for you?
Well, and that's the hardest thing, right? Is I can tell you exactly from like my standpoint with this, it's that it's so hard to put something like that into a standard regimen, right? The military answer is we need to have some type of, process and everything else, but it's going to be different for everybody, right? And that's the part where it's like, holy, like you can put anything in play, but when you're not accepting of when somebody can't fit into that, because their brain's wired differently, or they're taking something differently, or they're saw some really up or whatever, you've got to account for that. And that's the part where I think, especially, and that's why you and I, when we first talked, related so much, is because it's like, holy yes, is, what you did and what I did completely different, right? Not even the same book, let alone the same page, but it's the way that it's handled, right? It's the way that those career fields are looked at, and going, hey, yep, we recognize this sucks, right? We recognize you're putting you through some really and that's the answer, right? It's just like, we'll give you a couple extra days off. You'll be good, right? And that was the funny thing too. And I meant to bring this up earlier, is like, our first day off, right, on that 3-day weekend was technically what we called a recall day. So if all of a sudden somebody, broke their knee or something and doing snowboarding and dropped off the schedule, somebody else had to fill that slot. It's next man up mentality. And so there's plenty of times where it's like, holy, you're sitting there and you're like, all right, weekend, 3-day, that phone rings and you're like, son of a, right? And then, or the great one, because I don't know why this was a thing, but drugs are common in the military. Obviously, drugs, alcohol, things like that, right? Everybody uses different things to cope. And by no way am I saying like, yeah, do it. I'm saying it's common. For some reason in our career field, it was cocaine. I mean, I kind of do when you look at it, but everybody got busted for it. It was insane. So that was also the other thing, is we have times where we'd get drug tested up at base. So you're just sitting there on a weekend and you're like, all right, cool, I'm good to go. Right. I remember literally one time I was playing with one of my best friends, right? We were sitting there playing video games, just chilling out. All of a sudden he's like, we're on an over headset talking to each other, and he's like, ah, shit. He's like, we got a freaking drug test. Cause he gets the call. I'm like, just pick up my phone, and I'm like, just staring at it, waiting for it to ring. It rings, and I'm like, all right, dude. And he's like, I'll be there in 10 minutes and pick you up. It was so commonplace that it was just like, oh, all right, some idiot went and did coke again. Like, seriously? I know that got a little bit away from what you originally asked with this, but it's insane. You sit there and put these processes in place and think, oh, well, we're doing enough. But when
We're
you
checking a
just,
box. We're
yeah,
checking a box.
exactly. You even said it earlier, right? What were you trained right out the bat, right? Kill, kill, kill. But when you don't train for the other side of that, and recognize that, yes, there's these issues, and yes, that there's psychological effects that can happen from this, and everybody's going to handle it differently, and you don't provide any education, any support there besides, hey, go talk to someone. I don't mean this as a diss to any clinician, but it's such a cheap answer at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, that psychologist, even with the embedded psychologists in the units and things like that, or the people checking that box and things like that, they don't know what it's like to sit there and hack that mission day in and day out. And so, as much as they can hear the war stories and everything else, they don't truly get it. And so, for a group where, just like you said earlier, you got the times where you're like, "Hey, I can't tell you when I'm going, where I'm going. Might not be able to talk to you when I'm there," kind of thing. Same thing, right? We couldn't be like, "Oh, hey, man, I did a drone strike last night." You don't get to do that. How to process it? You don't know how to talk about it. You don't know how to deal with it, and then you're just shoved in this tube of go 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 until you move bases. And that's really the gist, because just like you said, when you did have those conscientious objectors or things like that threw their hands up and went, hey, I can't do this anymore. One, it was a huge stigma in the career field. Oh, he can't freaking do it. When I was in it, like, of course, everybody thought it. But at the end of the day, you're not understanding truly what the effect is. And that's also highlights. You want to know why we have stigmas in shit? It's because we don't talk about it. We don't talk about the tough stuff. We don't talk about the things that need to be talked about. We don't talk about mental health, right? We don't talk about the impacts that it's having psychologically. Because if we did, there wouldn't be stigmas. Those stigmas wouldn't exist. So for my community, your community, it doesn't matter. It's like all you have to do is start freaking talking about it and recognize it. And that will in itself shatter the stigmas. Because sitting there and being quiet, if there's any freaking group that's, has shown that doesn't work, it's ours, right? I mean, these have been going on for, we're coming up on the 20-year mark of when the Reaper, came on station. That also means we're coming up on the first time that people did this job for 20 years, that were career sensor operators, career RPA pilots. I can tell you it ain't good, because anybody that's in that boat that I know at 17 or 18 years is literally, I can think of 3 different people getting med boarded for PTSD right now off the top of my head. There ain't a big pool with that, because not a lot of people can sit there and, hash it out for that long. In fact, most people I knew, because I did 2 4-year enlistments, only because there's money involved, but most of the people did like 6 years, right? And then they punched. They got out, right? Nobody's staying in that career field. No one's sitting in that career field, especially coming in at 18, 19 years old, because you see so much shit, you deal with so much crap right off the bat. Then they send you to the schoolhouse and you're a young, E5 or whatever. And then it's like, oh, you finish up your schoolhouse rotation of 3 to 4 years. And then it's like, well, you want to go back to combat? And I'm like, fuck that. I don't want to go back and have to go through that again after I am already just exhausted. The schoolhouse was no cakewalk either. I remember having generals do the dog and pony shows where, some top brass comes rolling through the squadron. Holy shit, everybody clean it, make it look perfect, pristine. And, I'd get thrown on a couple, talk about what we did, how our training was, all that stuff. Hey, you're the type of guy that we're trying to retain. What can we do? You're on 7 years, got all this experience. How do we retain you? And I'm like, pay me more and stop putting me in the desert. I'm like, because that's the problem, is all our bases are in, even the newer ones they've done, it's South Carolina, in a really whole part of South Carolina, right? You've got that, Missouri, New Mexico, and Nevada. Like, you're not talking about, lush green valleys here where you're putting these things, and you can't figure out why you have retention problems. Give me a break.
So going back a lot of that, brother, there's so many things to unpack there. We're going to get to those, and it's going to help me because my brain's firing so fast. There's so many different things I want to stop and talk about in depth. But my initial question, right? So You're in charge of the 75th Ranger Regiment, 1st Ranger Battalion. We just got back from combat. This is our training cycle. We got 4 days off. We got 2 of those coming up, and then we got work for 4 days and have 3 days off. So if you got to pick, how would you roll that out? Your average person would go, every person in the entire battalion that was on this deployment has to talk to one person. We don't have 2. We don't have 5. We've got 1. We need to check that box, bro. We've got to check that box because mental health is really important to us. That's why we have one person here that everyone needs to talk to. And by the way, while we're in deployment, somewhere out there, we don't know where because we work at night and we're busy killing people for a living. Somewhere there's somebody who's asleep, but I'm sure that you could wake them up. You could go talk to them at any time. You could go talk to them at any time. Yeah, just feel free. I know you're going to be packing and leaving, going out the door to go on a combat mission. And if you go to talk to this person, who are you screwing? All of your guys to your right and your left. We'll come back to that part because I want to touch on that. Here's how it was rolled out. You would assume a person would go, okay, then I would have, of those work days, of those 3-day work days, I would schedule the very first week having everybody to have at least an hour and a half of being able to go talk to this person. And I would slowly integrate that in because, again, we just got back from combat. We have been working out. Let's not focus on 4 workouts a day like we normally do. Right now, we need to actually heal from all the stress we've been under. That, to me, would be my initial thought. Maybe other people would go, well, actually, let's let them come back and get back out there to a restaurant and eat and ease back into life first. Let them have time to process this. And then maybe one of those work weeks where we're working 4 days and having 3 days off, maybe the last one of those, I'll process everybody through those. Or maybe all of those, we have it available for everybody, but mandatory that everybody goes and checks that box at some time through here. And I'll work it out with their direct supervisors, with the platoon leaders, with the platoon commanders. Now, here's how it actually happened. We fly in and we land. We're in Savannah, Georgia. We are in our own base, Hunter Army Airfield. We have one airstrip that you can land on. We get out of the plane. We walk off the plane. We go to the hangar. Our families are now aware through the support group. They now know that their husband, the father of their children, is here. He's here. We haven't been able to tell them when we're deploying back. So now we're here and they just get a frantic call. Hey, by the way, your husband's going to be here in a couple of hours. So they scurry over to have this party for them, welcome them back, but you can't go to the hangar. Now we're at the hangar. Guess what every single person has to do before they can see their family members? Check a box. And nobody can see their family until everyone has checked the box. Bro, that blew my mind. I'm like, at that point, and I'm older because I come in the Marines at 19. So now I'm like 23 and I'm going, you're telling me that the smartest people that's in charge of us who have been to combat all this time, and this isn't some slam on them. It really is me trying to understand. You know that it's required. And I know that what they're probably thinking is, if there was issues, we would already know it. Let's just check this stupid box so that when we release them, we can release them and they can go let steam off and we don't have to worry about coming back and meeting with a psychologist. And let's just get this box checked. So that's literally everybody lines up and we have this lines to get your food. You've got lines to get whatever it is, because you're still in your disgusting, smelly clothes that you've been flying back and forth to Kuwait, Germany. I walk in. I've already heard everybody else laughing, and they're all trying to get this girl's number. The rule is whoever gets this girl's number is the winner. That is the baddest man in this unit, is whoever gets this psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever she was, gets her phone number. I walk in, bro. I'm like, They're like, okay, you checked on the boxes that you've seen friendlies dead, other members of other unit. You've been to funerals. You've seen dead bodies. You've sight, smells, all those things, people burned, all these things. You've been around dead combatants. And then she's like, how's that make you feel? I was like, I mean, I was real hungry when I got here. So I would say that I'm good. And she's like, well, but tell me about this. I'm like, I can't tell you about that. We're in special ops. And you know that. So what is it you want me to say? I can't even tell you where we were when we did these missions. And I can't even tell my family about what these missions. I can't tell anybody except for people in this unit. And technically you're in this unit, but guess what? For real, you're not one of us. So you have no idea. And when you said this is what made me want to drive this point home. You mentioned that these people have no clue what it is that you guys are dealing with. I would assume that if anybody had common sense that we're in charge of this, the first thing they would do is, okay, we've had this program up for 2 years, 3 years now. Any of you guys who have the willingness and the want to help your fellow brothers and sisters do this job, you can get your degree, be a psychologist. We are then going to pay you your same grade. I don't care what you're making. You're going to keep that same grade, or we're going to give you more money. You are going to be the psychologist. We're going to give you a structured life. You're going to be able to see your family. You're going to have normal hours, blah, 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 blah. And that is how you get people willing to actually talk to somebody. But you have to take away the stigma of how other people are going to find out that you went and talked to them. Now, I found this. I just did a podcast last Thursday, with a guy who came to I was working at Quiet Professionals here in Tampa, Florida. Former Delta Force Sergeant Major Andy Wilson started his own private company. Now, he found out that a woman with severe PTSD from multiple different things, not one time issue. She had multiple issues and she hadn't slept a full night in years. She comes to an event that we put on. She talks with a guy. He walks her through her memories without her having to explain all of it, and then reframes it for her and has her understand and process. All he's doing is walking her through processing what she saw, what she went through. And when that happened that night, she slept for better than she'd ever slept in so long. She contacts our CEO, who she used to work directly for years ago, and says, they just changed my life. I am a completely different person. I literally was there with them for 45 minutes to an hour. Andy immediately goes, let's bring that guy in. Now, here's how he did it, and here's how the military should do it. They're here every day from these hours to these hours. It's sent out in an email. Everybody has it. There's pinned up papers everywhere that says, you can't miss this. It's in the bathroom. It's everywhere. You know that this guy is here. If you want to be slotted to go talk to this person, you can click on a link that has the calendar, that has the time, click a time of what day you want to do it. You will then go talk to them. Everybody is going to be able to schedule themselves to go do it, and nobody will know that you're there. I'm a recruiter. How is my boss not going to know where I am? That's part of the beauty of this. We have mandatory meetings that are going to be happening with the CEO that he has, where he actually sits down face to face with every single person in his entire company. And he talks to them for like 30 minutes and says, for real, what is it you're dealing with in real life? Don't lie to me. You tell me if your boss is screwing you over, if you're having difficulties with cowork, you tell me the truth, everything, and there will be no reprisals. That's how you do it, because you have to give them a reason to be gone, and you have to give them a reason that people aren't going to know. I still don't know. And I helped bring these guys in. I have no idea how many people went and talked to them. None, zero. It was on a different floor. So they went to a floor. You didn't know where they went. They went down the stairs. They might be going to lunch. They might go to the gym. They might go. That's how it should be done. That's how it should be done. And that, again, that's just my humble opinion.
No, I and that's really, that's why I started Remote Warrior, with the whole thing. It's like trying to bring some semblance of that, because that's something that I identified super early on, right? Was, yeah, we've got these operational psychologists embedded in the unit, but they're not read into the exact same stuff we are, right? So we can't talk about a bunch of things, right? Exactly like you hit on, right? I can't sit there and say, oh, I was flying missions XYZ and doing ABC, and this happened. Just falling so short on actually getting these guys non-stigmatized help. Getting them to understand that, if you need to go and talk to someone, you can. I've heard horror stories of like guard units and stuff that are pulling vet center records and then holding it against people. And it's like, that is not the right thing at all. Like, you can't just keep grinding these people away and punishing them every time they go to seek help. Like, one, you're screwing your community, you're screwing the country's security, right? You want to talk about national security implications? Like, Jesus, like, who do you think goes and fills all the contract gigs, right? That nobody wants to go do because it's in, god awful places and things like that, and they got to make 150K to make it worth it. It's all the ex freaking censors and pilots and that go and fill these gigs. If you're not taking care of them at this level, you're hurting yourself overall. It's like, this isn't just a, hey, well, once they take off the uniform, then they can deal with that. It's like, no, you don't understand the long-term implications that the leadership and the change makers and the decision makers here continuing to ignore this problem, acting like it doesn't exist, because exactly like what you're explaining, right? All it ends up being at the end of the day is people don't buy into it, which is exactly why everybody's trying to get that girl's number. And it's like, that's the perfect example. And they're going to find a way to make a joke out of it or something, right?
Dark
They're
humor.
gonna exactly, we freaking thrive off of it. But when you do that and it clearly misses the mark, right, in that scenario, because nobody's taking it seriously then. And that should be your first freaking line of like, oh shit, maybe we missed the mark on this, right? And we need to restructure this. Exactly like you said, though, increasing the visibility of it, right, of those programs, bringing in someone that actually gets it, right, and can speak the language, can understand the culture, because that's the biggest problem. Why does the Department of Veteran Affairs trying to push for 1 million people to get enrolled this year, and their numbers are down? It's like, because you keep hiring civilians as doctors that don't understand. Like, if you truly want to, make this work, then you need the right people in the room that understand from a baseline level what the job is, right? I need somebody from soft to be trained as a psychologist embedded in the unit. I need somebody, with RPAs to have a psychological background that can speak to both sides, because that's the only way you make that connection. Otherwise, all we're doing is trying to treat this in a vacuum that just doesn't work at the end of the day, right? Because you're always going to be missing some mark. It's why a lot of people, and myself included, it's why I've walked away from different therapies, throughout my 7 years of being out, because I'm like, yeah, I understand what you're trying to do, but we're on different playing fields completely. And so I'm never going to be able to get there, because I can't even get a basic understanding of, for me, walking into a freaking, let's say, a VA appointment and being like, hey, do you know what a drone is? And they're just like, huh? And I'm like, I'm like, here we go. I got to spend 25 minutes of the 30-minute appointment explaining what my job was and how I can be, mentally deployed, but physically stateside, right?
Yeah.
Because even that concept, after 20 years of doing this, as a country, I just had it happen to a buddy a couple months ago. He was getting med boarded. He's one of those individuals earlier that I mentioned that's getting med boarded for PTSD. He's been doing it for 18 years. That dude's killed hundreds of people. I mean, personally. I mean, he's been through so fucking much. And the flight doc looked at him and went, well, you didn't deploy, so how can you have trauma? And it's like, are we serious with this? Like, are you kidding me? 20 years, and we're still taking this shit for granted and still ignoring what's happening, even when all the signs are in front of us. And that's the thing that kills me with, like I said, I'll never point direct fingers, but the silence that's in this community makes me sick to my stomach, because everybody wants to act like it's not a problem, but I guarantee anybody that's a pilot or a sensor operator has lost at least one person to suicide. That if they didn't know, they knew, through somebody, something like that, or was at their unit, because it's happened many times, so many times. I mean, I've lost count at this point. I think in 15 years, I think there's 40 different people plus that I've known that have lost their life to suicide in this community. And it's because of crap like this, right? It's because of stigmas like this that aren't being acknowledged, aren't being, hey, we need to put a precedence into taking care of these people and not just continuing to check a box.
And something that you said there that I think, right, it's not just, I think because it's suicide, it's easier for people to mentally go, well, I didn't, air quotes, get him killed, get her killed.
Mm-hmm.
She chose that. He chose that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's easier for the command
Mm-hmm.
to cover that up on Google, to
Mm-hmm.
take it away from the internet so you can't know about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what you just said, I think the silence that I'm hearing,
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason. I've been wanting to talk to somebody who's done this job for quite some time, and I'm pretty well connected with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
You are the first person that's willing to openly talk about this. And the reason, as you alluded to earlier, that I think we made such a quick connection so fast is because I have seen firsthand with something as simple as going and talking to a psychologist where I'm trying to get her number. And I understand that this was for the same for me. It was a checkbox. I don't think it's as terrible what we were doing as it was for you guys for this reason. I can rationalize why you would want to just get this done real fast, pull the Band-Aid off. And then if people have real problems, they've already met her, they've already talked to her, they're much more willing, much more likely in our command's mind to then go seek her out and talk to her later while everybody's gone on 3-day, 4-day weekends. You can take your time and go talk to this person. They're still going to be at work.
Mm-hmm.
I can rationalize that.
Yeah.
When you have a program that's been doing this for 20 years, let's just talk about burnout, just the number of people that are leaving because they can't stay. And when you're brought in on a dog and pony show and they go, well, gosh darn it, why is it all these people leave? I mean, goodness, we think we treat y'all well enough. And I don't know why they sound like they work at a general store in the 1800s, but to me, they have to come off as being so simple-minded that if that were a true question and you fired back a real answer at them, they would be so appalled by reality that they wouldn't be able to grasp what you said. And of course, you would absolutely get hammered and they'd probably kick you out.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that here's part of it. The fact that they are, I don't know why that came on. Hang on. The fact that they're covering this up on the internet and the fact that they are absolutely aware that suicide is an issue, not just with people getting out, but people on duty are committing suicide. I've had that happen with a job I worked at where somebody didn't show up for their shift and they had same thing, put a gun, unfortunately, in their mouth and they had taken their own life. That to me reeks of, you can't do that for 20 years and pretend that's some unforeseen issue. You know it. Oh, it's there at the level. I'm not saying all the way at the top, but at the level of the people that are there on a day-to-day basis on that base, they're making decisions. They absolutely know that's an issue and they know it well enough to make sure that the information doesn't get out. That's why it's being censored by somebody. And that's, again, someone in command is making those calls. Somebody in command is making sure that that is taken down. Bro, that to me, we've seen so much in this country of people who are suffering in silence. We have all these campaigns of 22 a day and blah, 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 blah. We're always talking about the veterans after they get out, and nobody's talking about the suffering that's happening in the military right now. As we speak, this is happening to somebody right now who's flying patterns, who hasn't slept well in a couple of years minimum, who is completely detached from society who's detached from the rest of the military, because if you complain, if you tell the truth, the people are going to mock you because you didn't happen to have your feet on foreign soil when you dropped the bombs. One of the jobs I was recruiting for with the Constellus, which bought Triple Canopy, bought Blackwater. One of those jobs that I forgot to mention was, one of the guys I was helping recruit for was drone pilots. And because of, and I remembered it only when I was reading in the book on Killing Remotely, that it talks about how contractors, there was that conflict where contractors can't be allowed to drop bombs on people. So they're only allowed to fly recon. They're only allowed to do drones without armament. And I was recruiting, I wasn't recruiting directly. I was helping the recruiter because they're struggling to find this. And here's the parameters they gave me. This is what they told me. All you need to know is this. We're paying them $60,000 up front when they graduate from the training. We're going to be giving them basically about between $60,000 and $80,000 per year to do the job. They're going to be in Kuwait. They're going to be now I know they're going to be in a metal shipping container, but they're going to be over there. They're not going to be in combat, but they're going to be deployed. And then they don't have to have flight experience. However, we're looking for pilots. If you can find anybody that's ever flown anything, that's ideal. Secondary, anybody who is in special operations, anybody soft, we can train them. I didn't find anybody for that program. And I personally was recruiting directly from SOF. I went to Fort Lewis, JBLM, and recruited directly from Special Forces retiree coast. I'm recruiting SOF guys. That's who I want on my team because I'm literally recruiting guys I'm about to deploy with in a year. It was so hard once you start talking to these people and you're explaining what a great idea this is, and they're looking at you like you have a third eyeball, and I'm like, what eye are you guys looking at? It didn't dawn on me until I read this book, until I'm listening to you. They already knew the deal. Those people already knew the deal. Now, I will say it is a great idea that if people like me, who are very much in touch with combat, have been there, can handle the stress of being deployed multiple times. If that person were put in that seat instead of a kid who didn't even know at 19 years old that's what he was signing up for, and oh, by the way, you're about to walk into a crap storm and that's going to be your life for the next few years. That's the thing I want everybody to take away from our talks, man, is this is happening right now as we speak. After this podcast, after you've listened to this entire podcast, it will continue happening. When we do our next podcast, it's still going to be happening. And people are likely, there's always a likelihood that somebody is going to take their life because no change is happening. And when this loss of life is not counted in the stat sheets and it's covered up on Google, that doesn't make their life any less valuable. And so I personally want to be very careful with this because I want to give families, time to grieve, and I want to be respectful, but I also want to bring awareness that their lives matter, did amazing things for their country. And when somebody looks at you and laughs and is like, you can't have PTSD, or any of your fellow pilots have been told that they can't have PTSD because what they were doing was playing a video game. What they were doing was no more than watching a screen and clicking some buttons. That is not the same thing as taking fire and taking someone's life up close. Well, guess what? When I first get to Ranger Battalion and they look at me and we're going over just the basics of my job, and I'm trying to grasp what it is I'm doing. Cause again, I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but I came from the Marine Corps, so I'm ready. Whatever it is, let's do it. September 11th just happened. That's why I'm here. And I bring this back to 9/11 because we started this podcast at 9:03 a.m. on September 11th, 2025. It's the day that changed my entire life's trajectory. It changed your life's trajectory because, once again, 9/11 was the flagpole that we have all been drawn to. We wanted to take out evil people before they could do that to our country again, so that that never happens on our soil ever again.
Mm-hmm.
Brother, it's been amazing talking to you. People's lives are at stake as we speak, and we're going to continue to hammer this home, and you're welcome back as many times as you ever want to be back. You're setting up programs to help people like you. One thing you didn't tell is how many people are involved in this. If you would share the numbers of how many people are involved in this entire process and do the support for these programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one where you know, we're actually working with the VA right now, the Veterans Experience Office, to pull the exact veteran numbers. But right now, my estimate, active duty, is like 200,000 people with this, right? Because it's not just pilots, it's not just sensors, right? It's the intel, you know, analysts that are behind the scenes, you know, literally in these people's headsets, saying, hey, that's a RPG or that's a piece of PVC pipe, and then having to sit there and watch the strike and then clip the footage and then replay it over and over and over again.
And we'll get into that. We'll get into all those, because that is mind-boggling for me right there.
Exactly. So, you know, it's there's hundreds of thousands of people that are, you know, experiencing this at this point, you know, and we all know, especially with everything that's happened of recent, you know, this year with, you know, drones and remote warfare and everything else, with Ukraine, with, you know, the Skydio signing a contract with the DoD. This stuff isn't going anywhere. Right. This is just going to get worse with it, because we don't know what the full blown long term effects of this are. Trying to get this large group of people, a lot larger than people think, the help they need, because right now it's falling on deaf ears.
Yeah. And that's the true tragedy. Yeah. All right, brother, we're going to stop there. I'm going to get back into a lot of these topics with you, and we're going to delve more into it. The one thing that I'm going to kind of just tease the next episode, I didn't fully go into the movie Deja Vu. The main point I wanted to make was Denzel Washington recognizes now that this girl's life can be saved, and now he wants to save her. And they don't care about this girl's life, and that's the conflict in the movie initially. Is the moral. You mentioned an example, and you're going to share more of these, but the one of the two guys walking together, and one pulls out the gun and just shoots the other, and then he keeps walking. The moral injury of bad guy just murdered somebody, let's take him out, and you are there amped up, ready to kill this piece of garbage who just murdered somebody. And what do? Just follow him.
Yep.
And just follow him. And then you pass him off to somebody else. Watch that guy. He just killed somebody. And I'm sure the person that you would say that to would be like, I know you're new here. Here's the deal. I've watched people being beheaded. I've watched people burn other people alive. I've watched people torturing people nonstop in front of me in high definition. And I've been doing this for years. That's nothing, bro. He shot him. That's not even a Tuesday.
Yeah.
That is nothing compared to what we're going to be watching for years on end. And you may not be the one who gets to say justice, right? You see him murder somebody, you get to be the one that kills him. You go away on your rotation, you come back, and Stay Puft's gone.
Yep.
This guy is gone. And now you feel, because you're a human being, you feel robbed because that was your guy. You watched him commit murder. You watched him behead somebody. You want payback from this piece of garbage.
Yep.
And instead, they're just gone. You're on this guy now. And now somebody else is like, bro, you better watch that guy, because I watched him, this little boy, this little girl. And he's like, bro, that's another Tuesday. What are we talking about here? And just to understand that what you guys are having to see on a daily basis, the whole world yesterday, September 10th, all of America, I'll say, got to see that there was a Charlie Kirk, that this guy was out on a college campus just sharing his beliefs, just sharing a lot of just common sense with people that have been indoctrinated into not even comprehending common sense anymore.
Yeah.
And he was murdered. It was definitely, it was a political murder. He wasn't shot because of a road rage incident.
Yeah.
He was shot because of his beliefs, his ideas that he's sharing. And whoever it is that pulls this trigger, it doesn't matter. That's not what I'm talking about right
Nope.
now. What I'm talking about is everybody got to witness, and we almost saw it with Donald Trump, a person be murdered on live TV, on a live, obviously it's on recorded is where you're seeing it. This is what you guys are seeing, and much worse every single day. And oh, by the way, strip away every normal thing that would make your life normal. Any of your ability to talk to somebody about that, let's take that away. Have all these, have that rolling in your brain hundreds of times of all these missions, of all the horrific things that you've seen done to children, to innocent men and women, to old people, to people that were defenseless. Like, bro, that absolutely breaks my heart. There are people out there that are choosing to take their own life because it's better in their mind in that moment than to suffer like this for another day.
Yep.
That's what I know your mission is to save lives. There is no greater mission than to save lives. Tell people where they can go to follow you, what you are putting out, and that will be the end of this episode, and we'll get into more next time.
Absolutely. So remotewarriorllc.com is our website there, and we've got tons of different resources as well, right? I've created all the way down to a called the Fog of War guide, essentially just putting plain language into some of the way that people might be feeling, specifically for the operators themselves, being pilots and sensors, intel, whoever falls into that category. But also we've got guides for family members. We've got guides for spouses that, like, we've had our own spouses and family members help curate and add to, just to make it seem a little more normal, right? Because that's really what we're coming down to. We talk about suicide. What it comes down to is that people feel like they're the only ones going through that. I can tell you from personal experience, that's couldn't be farther from the truth. We're also on pretty much every social media out there: Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, with Remote Warrior under there for it. And like I said, we're constantly, being able to push these resources out. And then the last thing that's came from it is actually this ammo can, right? So there's our panic packs from there, and it's actually something that I created because I just got really tired of white knuckling through panic attacks. So it's a bunch of grounding tools in a 11-inch ammo can. It hits on all 5 senses. It's got two devices, if you will, per sense. And the beauty of it, there's no internet required. Things like tuning forks and stuff like that, just to be able to pull you out of a panic attack. Lavender rollers, different things like little fidget things, right? Because that's really what comes down to. And if you've never experienced one, they're horrible. We don't know what the threat is. We can't figure it out, but make it stop. And you're like, I don't know what to do, right? So it's to pull you out of that mindset and reground you in that moment. And we've got a nice little script that we add in there that walks you through exactly what to do. Even if you dumped everything out and refilled it with a bunch of your own stuff, it still works. But we realized really quickly that, holy cow, this isn't just for remote warriors. This is for anybody, right? That deals with panic attacks, depression, anxiety, high stress jobs, that kind of stuff too. So, being dads, and obviously the Business Insider interview coming out next week, 1 week here. So that'll be a huge one. So look for that on all our socials too.
I'll be pushing that on all my social media when that comes out, for sure.
For sure.
Awesome, brother. Well, again, thank you. Sincerely, thank you for your service to our country. I know that you didn't sign up for what you ended up doing, but for somebody to have come through what you've come through, and then this is the most important part, having the courage to take on the hate that you're going to get, the amount of discomfort that comes from wanting to step outside of the circle and be the one that points back and goes, we need this fixed. And you already know that there's going to be people that are going to automatically call you names, and you're not going to be welcomed in certain circles. That's what I'm saying. I already know that's there, right? And I know that there are already Rangers that absolutely hated the way my face looked the first time they saw me, and they hated me then for no reason. And then now I'm giving him all the ammunition because I'm talking about the ridiculous checkbox that we went through of talking to our psychologist, which was a joke, right? And again, We were very much ready for and very willing to go directly into combat and into the worst of the worst scenarios where we're going to be pinned down. This is going to be Black Hawk Down times 2, times 5. And we went on those missions anyways. This is a suicide mission. Nobody's making it back. Who's going? Ranger Regiment, because the SEALs won't do it. I'm sorry, DevGru won't do it. And Delta Force refused to do it. So who else is left? Here am I, Lord, send me. And at the end of the day, you didn't sign up to do that, and you were put through that. And the fact that you had the courage to go through it anyways, and then now having the courage to step out and go, it's not okay that we're committing suicide. It's not okay that cocaine is rampant in our circles. It's not okay that all of the shift work is creating insomniacs, and we're supposed to be at the top of our game making life and death decisions. We'll get into a next podcast all the different other aspects and maybe more of what people want to hear, the nitty gritty gross parts of the things that you've actually endured. But I just wanted to make a baseline here where people can understand where you're coming from and some of the challenges that you had to overcome to even be on a podcast and to not put a gun in your mouth. And join the numbers of people, like you said, 40 plus people that you're aware of that have taken their life, that should be alive today, that should be with their families, that should be here helping. And instead, we've lost those people. So thank you for being on here, brother.
Absolutely.
Because my brain loves to drop that shit off and be like, oh, close the window. And I'm like, oh, you idiot. Why'd you do that for?